In the Company of Death: Medicine, War, and the Architecture of Medical Genocide. Available on Dystopia Unmasked, Substack.com. This is an article that is quite promising. It contains, I'll just read the headlines.
Mhm,
Necropolitical Architecture is the first
mhm,
headline of the article that we're going to discuss today. In the Company of Death: Medicine, War, and the Architecture of Medical Genocide. Let that sink in. Medicine. You didn't say health. We could look into that a little bit. Why do you say
mhm,
medicine
mhm,
and not health? War
mhm,
and the architecture of medical genocide. And it continues on. Um, Necropolitical architecture, death, oldest companion, death's oldest companion. And you say death and medicine are ancient companions.
mhm,
And the engine of empire, war, invention, and medical transformation. The engine of empire: war, invention, and medical transformation. And the body as battlefield: tropical medicine and the calculus of conquest. The body as battlefield, tropical medicine, and the calculus of conquest, where you point out that it was a numbers game. And the plantation as clinic, medicine in the economy of slavery.
mhm.
I see. So the Creole's role is essential here too, if one wants to uh, project it further. From the battlefield to the state, the soldier and the citizen. Oh wow. Oh, I mean, this is quite something. From the battlefield to the state, the soldier and the citizen. Medicine from the battlefield to public health. And then pandemic as policy, COVID and the return of necropolitical logic. So these are quite a few heavy themes. Epistemological war, Hoffman and Flexner redraw the borders of care, and then medicine as death work from omission to permission, and Gaza and the final collapse of care. And Gaza and the final collapse of care. Just from the subtitles, it becomes clear that what is happening here is, again, macro history
Mhm,
and a macro panoramic perspective. So the history goes all the way back to the plantation. I think
mhm.
and you go even further back than that. I think it goes even into the medieval age, just from the subtitles, just from pointing to even before antiquity.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Imhotep. If you're looking at human documented efforts at medication
Mhm,
and the reality of the inevitability of death. So we go all the way back to the first documented case of efforts at medication, which I believe to be Imhotep in Egypt. Um, and we end up in Gaza. So again, we talk about health and medicine, and we talk about Egypt. One of your most impactful to me. Oh, I found a good segue. One of your
mhm,
most impactful articles in the last year, to me, was the one you wrote, according to your own words, when you were
mhm,
struck by a fever.
mhm,
And
mhm.
it was macro historical in nature. And it was an article that explained, as I find, in a way that seeks its equal, the geostrategic and geopolitical underpinnings, the timelessness of the geopolitical and geostrategic underpinnings of the efforts being undertaken by the US as an imperial construct around the Red Sea, around the Mediterranean region. And here too, we sense, as you speak of health, medicine, we sense that you're maybe not going as far back as Egypt in
Mhm,
antiquity, but that you're ripping open the temporal perspective to
mhm.
draw to this day insights from how we relate
Yeah.
to the healthy body. And
Yeah.
you end with Gaza: in the company of death, medicine, war, and the architecture of medical genocide. Here's a proposal. Is it a good idea, perhaps, if I state the subtitles of the different parts and we dig into those part by part? Is
We
that
could do that. Yeah, we could. That's a good way to do it. Yeah.
okay? So then I would start with the subtitle. In the
Hmm.
Company of Death is the title. Medicine, War, and the Architecture of Medical Genocide. Do you want to say something about the subtitle, about the title and the subtitle to start with?
Well, the, the threat of death stands at the limit of health, and so medicine often finds itself in the situation not of the promotion of health, but the war against death. Okay, and I one of the things I wanted to do was to show how that logic itself will always end up being defined as a war, being defined. Yeah, it lends itself to the terms of war. So often, if you look at the way a civilization looks at the matter of health and what it focuses on, its care, it tells you a lot about the orientation of that society.
Hmm.
So, um, and I give you an example. The Chinese civilization, um, it always lent itself, in the governance of its physicians. They got paid when you stayed well. They didn't get paid if you got sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it also allowed a whole economy of physicians. So physicians ended up quite embedded in the economy of China. And China, again, I think it's really important to state that China is not a monolith. The Chinese are a diverse spread of different ethnicities,
Mm-hmm.
and they are governed by a group which are dominated by a group called the Han. But the Han Chinese have dominated, but they have never done that exclusively. So that they've always done that in partnership with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're looking at in the fixation of China on in their medicine is that it shows you something of their care, right? Or so they didn't declare medicine as exclusively a war against illness, right? But it was a project to maintain health. The war against illness is always present. I mean, that you see in some of the ancient classics as you read, which yeah, you see there are a few ancient classics of Chinese medicine, and you see that that this aspect of the war against death and the war against aging are part of its a part of its landscape. What I'm saying is that these things are not, you can't separate them from the landscape of health. But when you see the absence or the relative relationship between the preservation of health and the war against death or illness, you have to see that it tells you a lot about the texture of the society.
I have to let this sink in very slowly and very deeply. This article and this little explanation you gave actually mm, hits on what I have found to be, for me, in my intellectual explorations, the most challenging, and if I'm very honest, the most difficult thing I have ever had to think about, which is this liminal, this liminal transitory interstice between health and illness. I have a little bit, a modicum of familiarity with the theme that goes very deep because of peace studies, peace research. I'll just just a short parenthesis, and then I'll get back to everything you said. But I hope that what I'm going to say now will show the audience um, how complex that field is, because death is the negation of life. No, as far as we can tell, as far as we can tell, death is the negation of life. It's a sort of an end state of this realm, in this physicality. Illness is part of that transitory experience into death, if it's not a small illness, if it is a fatal illness. And what you've just shared with us, you said it 3 times. I think it shouldn't be missed. Is Are you saying that it's paradigmatical? It is a paradigm shift, whether you're looking at fighting death and illness, or whether you're looking at augmenting and increasing and improving health.
Mhm.
Is it a paradigmatic difference, or do you see here that these two are sort of have an overlap? Is it a small overlap or a big overlap between fighting death, fighting illness, and augmenting and improving health and well-being and
I,
wellness?
I I think that these two are always present,
Okay.
right? The thing about it is the orientation of the society will lean either to one or the other, or to a space of relative balance in the middle, and that will tell you a lot about the nature of that society. But you can't, the nature of this challenge is that they will always be, both of them will be present.
This explains the title, In the
Mm-hmm.
Company of Death.
Mm-hmm.
In the company of death. Death is omnipresent at all times. We
Mm-hmm.
carry it around with us. It's just not active yet. We could
Or,
say that.
or another way of looking at it is the there's a verse of the Quran which I have been reflecting on for 30 something years. It's الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. Yeah, he who created death and life. I always find it interesting that Allah mentions death first. الذي خلق الموت والحياة. Yeah, he who created death and life ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. So to see which of you is is best in actions. Okay, so the first he mentions death. So there's also something which is temporal, which is that before we were alive in our non-existence, we can consider that death.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so in this life then becomes an interspace between non-existence to, at least to this realm, some relative non-existence, right? And so it and also when you reflect on it, it is that you don't have any control over how and when you come into the world. Okay.
Hmm.
And in truth, you don't have any control over when you leave. Okay. And so that aspect of how you live
Hmm.
dictates how you will relate to life, to life and to death, ultimately, including, and that texture gives you health.
Fascinating thing to
Yeah.
think about. It is fascinating to think about. So there is a and the deeper we'll get into this, I think the clearer it will become how complex it is. You have the subtitle Medicine, War, and the Architecture of Medical Genocide. That is three concepts inside the subtitle. Can you touch on each one of them? Medicine, war, and the architecture, the structure, the solidity of medical genocide.
Okay, so there are two which are necessary. So medicine, which
Hmm.
necessary or a part of the of the terrain of life, right? Medicine and war are part of the terrain of life in the history of man. Medical genocide itself was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of medical genocide, I speak specifically about the attempt by Prudential to define American healthcare in a way that would result in the eugenic elimination of African Americans. It was an act of ethnic cleansing and slow genocide of African Americans. And it was done by making it difficult to insure African Americans in the assumption that without medical interventions, African Americans as a species would die out because they had a propensity towards disease. According to the research of a man called Hoffman,
Yes.
who was a
Yes.
German immigrant.
Yes. I remember
Okay.
now. Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's coming back
So
to me. And he didn't. Oh Lord, it's come back to me now. This is why he wrote a book that I have somewhere, um, on why not to insure African Americans.
yes,
The whole point
yes,
was don't insure them, and it will have their population decline.
precisely.
Ah, that was, yes. I remember him. Yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
guy.
And it's 1896 he wrote the book. The book is
Mhm.
called Race Traits and Tendencies of the American Negro.
Yes, I
And
remember.
and um, and what's his name?
Hmm.
Magisterial American intellect, Black American intellect.
Oh, there's a
Um,
couple. Well, do you mean Du Bois?
Dubois, yeah,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Dubois, yeah, Dubois,
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, his work. He wrote a refutation of that, which is
Hmm. Hmm.
on the point, on
I
point,
haven't
not
seen it.
long,
I haven't
not
seen it.
long, and slices to the bone as he usually does.
Okay, I have to write that down. I had forgotten all about Hoffman. I had forgotten all about Hoffman, but please tell us a little bit more about this angle. So, and Hoffman shows up every now and then in conversations specifically about efforts to undermine the vitality of African Americans in the US. And it's also combined sometimes with Planned Parenthood conversations.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
yeah.
Because what's interesting is that Hoffman was employed by Prudential who Insurance,
Hmm.
and they had hunted him for his views. And they had hunted him for his views because there was a legal it would it what they were doing, there were legal pressures for them to deal with African Americans fairly.
Hmm.
So what they needed to do was to generate a scientific reason for dealing with them as they were. Okay, because they didn't intend to insure them, and they did not feel that they should because it's 1896. They did not think that they should maintain any of the of the um of the gains which they had made during Reconstruction.
Hmm.
And so this was part of the effort to dismantle that.
Hmm.
Um, and, like Lincoln, they did not think that Black Americans were a necessary part of the American landscape, because Abraham Lincoln didn't think that too. He thought that Black and white Americans would not be able to live together, and that you should really repatriate them to
Liberia.
Liberia. Okay, so and also what you also have to remember is that the import of German immigrants and then French immigrants was
Hmm.
part of the effort to ensure that the demographics were weighted in favor of white Americans. So when we're looking at Trump and that lot right now who are trying to whiten America is
Mhm.
the same thing. Okay, so what part of what I'm actually arguing in this article is that these kinds of and because we tend to call them prejudices, I don't like calling them prejudices, right? Because they are about the psychopolitics, the psychopolitical structure of Europe and the European, because as I said no, I didn't say. I've been writing, I've been thinking, because the European is a Creole, right? The
Mhm.
European is a super ethnic creation, right? In the sense that the European is not an ethnicity,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Europe has many ethnicities, etc. So in the creation of the European, a Creole identity has been created,
Yes.
which agrees with Glisson, right? I found myself I found myself sitting at Glisson's front door, and I didn't know how I got there, but then I realized, yes, well, so I have to come to terms with Glisson. Um,
Mhm.
so the European identity is a Creole identity, and in the construction of that identity was power.
Yes.
So it is a psychopolitical creation to ensure its dominance over the brown, right? The black and the brown. And so what you keep seeing is the surfacing of that. And for the African Americans who drink the Kool-Aid of equality, etc., they find themselves weaponized against Africans on the continent, which is the history of post-war um, American politics and economic domination of Africa. So that because that was done through the CIA, and that CIA effort was enacted utilizing African Americans, right, including Bunch, the fellow who um who did the work to establish Israel in the UN, right? So and now you see them making threats against Ibrahim Traore that he is using the gold as a shield for himself, right? And you
Mhm.
see they have a
Mhm.
black general doing it.
Yes.
So if you want to talk about everybody talks about Uncle Tom, this is not an Uncle Tom, this is a jackass,
Indeed.
right? And
Indeed.
and these kinds of jackasses are particularly dangerous.
Mhm.
And because they imagine that they actually have a seat at the table. But then what happens in the psychopolitics is that cyclically these things just reoccur. So you think you made some gains, and then this other thing which rises, which is about as what's his name, Dave Chappelle.
Mhm.
Dave Chappelle has a thing about white power,
Yes.
where he's got the black guy who grows up blind and
Oh.
thinks he's a
Mhm.
white supremacist. I think that's a necessary video to look at. Yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
because Chappelle, artfully as he does, shows you how this is a psycho-political construct. Okay,
Mm. Mm.
okay, because he ends up when he realizes that he's black, he ends up divorcing his wife because he says she's a nigger lover, right?
Mhm.
Only Chappelle, only Chappelle. I don't, I know. Yeah, yeah. So I'm just saying that what happened is that Prudential, because Hoffman later became this, I think he became the CEO of Prudential. But
Hold on, I have a page open here with him. I'm all ears. I'm all ears.
yeah. So what then happens? Okay, so Hoffman gets that position, and they design the legal framework for the American insurance industry, and these things were baked into its nature. And you know as civil rights movements came, etc., nobody felt it necessary to reassess and right this wrong, or
Hmm.
to demand that Prudential pay reparations for what they did to black people. Right?
Yes.
None of that ever happens, right? Which, um, but always when these white power movements surface, they always say that they are under attack by blacks,
Yes.
right? And um, but it's okay for them to attack African Americans and blacks and browns, but they always do it under the imagination that they do that. So I'm saying that this is really part of the psychotic psycho political architecture, and you can't allow yourself to exist under the imagination that it is going to change. It's had over 300 years to change. It has not.
Hmm.
It has
Hmm.
not, will not, has no intention of ever changing. But it needs, but part of it is that it has a need to make itself feel good, which is why it always generates the threat. So they're under threat. So they're acting because they're under threat. And they have to act like that because if they don't, they will face annihilation. This sounds like Israel,
Hmm.
right? It's the same argument.
It is indeed, and I'm sorry. I have a little detail here, if um, if I may, on his biography. His name is Frederick Ludwig Hoffmann, and there's a bit of irony in the few lines that I have here. I'd like to show the audience so they get a clear idea of who you're talking about in the context of, um, to use your terms in the subtitle, the architecture of medical genocide. And this is one of the chief architects of what then later on becomes the insurance system of the US as we know it today. So he's born as Friedrich Ludwig Hoffmann in Germany, and he lives through a difficult time. His father dies when he's 11. He's educated in common and private schools. And it begins here. His school days are marked by failures. They end in 1880 without a school leaving degree. Point one. Point two, he and his mother are living in difficult financial circumstances, and he begins an apprenticeship with various merchants. The apprenticeship ends 4 years later, also without a degree. Frederick sees no further professional future in Germany, where he has no degrees, has difficulties finding employment. He becomes the statistician for Prudential Insurance Company of America in 1891. That's 7 years later. No degree in 1880, no degree in 1884. In 1891, the opportunities are open in the new world, and he becomes the statistician for Prudential Insurance Company. Now, he's a racist against African Americans. Look. And here I have to input a small thing that I learned from working with um, a very respected man who, when he was born, he told me that when he was born, his family, when you're born, there's a little sort of well wishes are written into your book of birth. And he said his uncle wrote, and it became a most important thing for him. May he grow up not to bow down to those above and to kick down to those below. And I cannot help but think of that sentence, that guideline, when I read you're a complete failure in your efforts at establishing yourself in the formal ways. And then you get a formal position, and the first thing you do is you kick those that are at the bottom. He was a racist against African American in his studies of incarceration. He's employed as a statistician by many organizations and does research in ethnology and kindred subjects. He became the president of the American Statistical Association. I don't know whether that is a good look in the year 1911 for the American Statistical Association. And then he publishes a book, 1896, The Race, Traits, and Tendencies of the American Negro. He publishes that book, and the book's purpose, it is said, is to provide the insurance companies with a justification for the higher life insurance premiums charged to African Americans in the period of Reconstruction. It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I just wanted
And,
to throw that in here.
and so basically, the American export of health insurance
Mm-hmm.
to other countries as a way of solving their health problems,
Yep.
which they want to export to Britain. That is its origin,
Mm.
and this is a major issue with our types of democracies, because what happens is that um, there are certain types of injustices that get baked into the legality,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then they are enforced by legal means, and legal is then assumed to be moral,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and so they are not quite, and so that often there's aspects of the architecture which remain unquestioned, and so this is only one aspect of the genocidal architecture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another aspect of the genocidal architecture, and we're looking at the United States in particular, because they like to run around the world and tell people how bad they are, including the Chinese about the Uyghurs. Okay. And I'm saying that no, these are problems, but you are not a nation that has any right to tell us anything about any place.
I have to ask you something.
Clean up your own backyard first before we can have any respect for anything that that nation has to say.
Can you do me a favor, perhaps also for our audience? Is there anything you could tell us about the logic of insuring and the logic of insurance companies?
Um, Insurance companies come out of our making a business of
The
what.
uncertainty.
No, give me a second,
No,
because
sorry, sorry.
what you find is that communities have a way of mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
The way of mutual aid is that they will take some of what they have, a small percentage of what they have, they will throw it into a common pot, and that common pot must be made available to anybody who needs it, or if they hit a disaster.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a natural aspect of mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
With the destruction of guilds,
Mm-hmm.
because guilds were in Europe were the means by which that kind of mutual aid occurred. So with the destruction of guilds, it left open a space that no longer had that infrastructure, the architecture of mutual aid, and so they privatized what would have been mutual aid into insurance. Then with the rise of the slave trade and mercantile trade, and the need to insure cargoes, especially human cargoes, then this institution that had been a means of mutual aid became a means of incredible private profits. And in that case, it became defined in terms of risk, and actuarial has provided the ground for the development of much of probability theory and actuarial practices.
This is absolutely fascinating because, I mean, one would have to dive into that. It is the monetization and the elevation to to an industry of a mutual aid system.
Yes,
Hmm.
it is basically susu.
It is susu. I didn't want to use the word, but it is susu.
Yeah, it
Could you
is
please
susu.
say a few words about susu
No,
for?
no, you speak about susu, man. I mean, you're from yeah.
Well, it is. I don't know enough about it, I have to say. And the first time that it became a concept for me is or something to understand is that it is part of what I understand to be some of the mechanisms of trade and some of the mechanisms of commerce of um, a nation that is spread across the sub-Saharan space on the African continent. Now, I'm
Okay,
not, yeah,
okay, okay.
and
Go on.
maybe 2 points, and I'm quite sure you know more about that than I do because I remember how I came across this, and it had something to do with trading competencies ascribed to the Muslim populations. That it had something to do also with credit, taking credit. So this is how I got to Susu. How do you trade in large quantities across large spaces? And how do you create moments of trust and credit inside, I think it was the Monday population, across large spaces? And I came across this notion also in the context of what something that the Crusaders observed their Muslim counterparts do when they tried to penetrate the Middle East. They realized there were systems of trades and commerce that they didn't know in this way. And
Okay,
yeah, it's a savings. It's a savings.
okay.
It's an approach to savings and credit.
Okay, okay, okay. Um, let me come down because okay, our experience of susu
Mm-hmm.
is also slightly different, and I think it's useful. I think it gives an interesting lens into it.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever people of African descent have arrived in the new in the Americas, one of the first things we did, even as slaves, is to take your resources, some of your resources, and pitch them together. Okay, so that you always could generate a large amount. Sometimes that those resources would purchase the freedom of others. Sometimes it would just deal with the difficulties when they came. Sometimes it would pay the medical fees. But the understanding was that there's an aspect of of our culture which always must we must always put something together. Okay, sometimes it would pay for weapons, right? But you always put something together. Um, and use and in my own investigations, what I saw was that even let's say in grain producing communities across Africa, um, you would always have um, silos which were allocated to put things together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that poor people or you needed grain to plant or whatever would always be there. So this practice somehow is in and you find it all across the continent, at least where there are Bantu people, but I have a feeling that it is even wider than the Bantu, right?
This is absolutely fascinating, and it's a problem. Do you know? I sort of remember. So first of all, it is a way of creating stability, safety, security. Could we
It's a
say
way
that?
of doing that. Yeah, and also sometimes what will happen is that a group of people here have a pool,
Mm-hmm.
and you travel to another place,
Yes.
and so sometimes you can pick up your money from the pool in that place, and they will
Mm-hmm.
reconcile it.
Exactly. This is what I
Right.
read about. That's what I read about.
Okay. So what the reason why I went there is that you're coming at this, that comes at the susu from the other end. Okay.
Yes.
It,
Mm-hmm.
its origin is in mutual aid.
It's in mutual aid, creating a safety net in some sort.
Yeah.
And predictability, because we all pool in, let us say for a period of 4 months or 5 months, and there is a ranking order, and after the fifth month I get it, that after the next 5 months you get it, five
Yeah.
months later the third person gets it, and every month we pool in and pool in and pool in.
Yeah.
It creates sorry, predictable future. Sorry.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that you tend to leave a little bit in
Mm-hmm.
the pot
Mm-hmm.
for the pot.
Oh, look at that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that little bit in the pot for the pot. Like the Jamaicans have a saying, they say one cocoa bill full basket. In Guyana, we say one dirty bill dam. Right. This
Mm-hmm.
you leave a
Mm-hmm.
little bit in the pot for the pot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that can become quite, over the years, that can become quite big.
Now you start becoming a business entity.
Well, because this is mutual, but the rule is that nobody owns that. That is owned by the community, and so it always ensured that there was leadership in the communities. Why? Because it is a trusted person that holds the susu, and so the
Mm.
trusted person who holds the susu and who will also hold the pot, right, will often decide disputes.
It's a mutual.
Yeah, but they will decide disputes because
Yeah.
they are trusted and they have authority.
Mm-hmm.
You leave your wealth with them. You talk to them about your problem because you come. You say, look, so and so is having a baby, and you say, okay, well, I'll arrange so that she will collect her money in the month before she has her baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then if the person has the baby early, they might talk and they discuss. They say, oh, we moved you earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your
I
money.
So it's a sort of informal banking system.
I don't want to bring all of those European ideas in. That's their business.
All
This
right.
is our susu is mutual aid. It it pulls money together, and then this basic infrastructure is then um, repurposed. So this basic pattern is then repurposed in many other spheres, whether it's for business, whether it's for this, but it is a basic architecture. It is there is never any lending
Mm-hmm.
at interest in susu.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has
Excellent
it,
point.
right? No, there's never any lending at interest in susu. Um, we would fight you for that.
Can we, in light of this background explainer you've just given us, let's penetrate back to the word architecture of medical genocide. What's the difference?
The difference is that this is an understanding in which a community governs itself from within itself.
Bottom up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's bottom up, but it governs
It's
itself from within itself.
bottom.
Because the authority of the person who holds the 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 accumulated wealth,
Mm-hmm.
the authority of that person, it gives them political authority. But it's a very different wielding of the political authority. So when you start to talk about it in these terms of bottom up, etc., um, we're talking about a very different architecture.
Mm.
We're talking here we're talking about an architecture of medical genocide, because often with Susu, people will look after their medical bills. Oh gosh, we've just gone off on an angle here, on a tangent. Yeah, um, yeah, I'm noticing that the time is up.
Oh, but it looks like we have about 10 to 12 minutes. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Okay. Yeah. So yes. So it's a very different architecture. So what you have to be very careful of is that you have to develop your nomenclature, your semiotic framing from within that architecture, or you will colonize it.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, now I get it. Now I get it. Or you will colonize it, and this is a very good segue because we are speaking of, and you bring in the plantation. There
Mhm.
is in one of the subtitles. I'd like you to touch on that a little bit. You see links between the architecture of genocide, the medical architecture of genocide, um, and I mean that construct alone, sorry, the architecture of medical genocide you speak of, that construction alone is quite something to think about. But then you speak of the plantation as a clinic, medicine in the economy of slavery, medicine in the economy of slavery, and the plantation as clinic. Is there a straight line between the plantation as clinic, medicine in the economy of slavery, and this notion of the architecture of medical genocide that you are presenting to the reader?
Yeah. Well, yes, because on the plantation, when the doctor came from Europe, because the doctor would come from would have a European training,
Hmm.
um, and he would generally also have to reckon with um, indigenous American medicine. I hate to call it American, but yeah, it's in the and in the sense that um, American is from Amerigo Vespucci's name, right?
Yes.
So so I'm saying that just the naming of these lands
Hmm.
is itself problematic.
Hmm.
So the so what I'm saying here is that on the plantation was an exchange which is never acknowledged of the medical knowledge of of of, of African herbalists, um, and also of indigenous herbalists,
Yes.
and the extraction of their medical knowledge, and without any attribution, or yeah, without any attribution.
Absolutely.
But also you had a population who you could experiment on, and they weren't full people. They had no legal right.
And this continues on to the mid 1900s. I
This is
just
what's
mentioned
going on
that.
in Gaza,
It is what's going on in the world right
right?
now. Yes,
This
yes,
is
yes,
what's
yes,
going
yes.
on in Gaza. Gaza was kept as a concentration camp, in
Mm.
as a mass prison camp, in which you would experiment with military technology that has medical consequences,
There is
and
so much to say.
the Israeli university or academic machine is all about extracting that information for research in its research.
I'm going to have to do something that I've never done in these series before. I'm going to ask, it's an ask, whether you think you could afford to slap a 30-minute extension on today's session because there's so much here, and I feel like there's a lot here that we could excavate. Would you have the time to put
I
a
mean,
30 minutes?
I think I could go to 11:20. I couldn't go beyond that.
Okay, so then let me just quickly throw in a few things here. The last things you said here, you've excavated from memories long lost, the name Robert Koch. Robert Koch, at the back of my mind, is a doctor, a German physician, microbiologist. He's the discoverer of the causative agents of deadly infectious diseases, including tuberculosis, cholera, anthrax, and he's regarded as one of the main founders of modern bacteriology. I'll ask the audience to go and verify or check the dates for what I'm about to share with them, because I don't have it specifically. I haven't thought about this case in at least 20 years. Robert Koch was in Cameroon when
Mhm.
Cameroon was a
Baraka?
German colony.
Baraka? No, no, continue.
Oh, yeah. When
Could you
Cameroon
tell
was a
him once
German
he's called
colony,
me? I don't know what's going on.
and as such, he conducted
Tell me
experiments on patients in his search for the healing of, um, I think, the sleeping disease.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
have to verify exactly what disease it was. I may be mixing up things. This is very old knowledge. And what Alex just said reminded me of this. And I remember exactly where I was and how it made me feel to read that essay about 20, maybe 23 years ago. The Robert Koch story in Cameroon. If I cut it short, it is this is what stayed with me until this day. Medical ethics have a principle that when you doing research on the effectiveness of new medication, the principle to be applied is that of dosis minimum tolerata. You apply the new medication in the least intense concentration for it to work, and you observe in the patient whether it worked or whether it hasn't worked, and how it has worked, and what the effects are. And depending on the results you observe, you augment the dosage of the medication step by step until you find the effects of that dosage having the desired effects of removing the patient from death's grips and bringing the patient back into
Okay.
life.
Okay.
But our fellow Robert Koch in Cameroon approached, I have goosebumps now, approached the whole thing using the other way around. Doses maximum tolerata. So you come up with what you think might be the right quantity. You apply the quantity to the patient. Oh, he's dead. Okay, now I take a little bit less. Try on the next patient. Oh, he died too. Try on the next patient. She died too. And every other patient, you reduce a little bit until one of them stays alive.
Okay.
And
So
off you go to your Nobel Prize.
so
So,
in when he was doing that research, which he did regarding the sleeping sickness
mhm.
in German West
Cameroon.
Africa, which is Togo and Cameroon,
Yes.
he coined the term concentration camp.
Oh, he coined it.
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was the British in with the Boer Wars
No, no,
also.
no. He termed the term concentration camps, in which he would isolate and observe patients.
Mm. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Mm-hmm.
So there's um what do you call it? That German news network that has the name DW.
Sorry, the German bead. Come again?
DW, the German
Deutsche Welle. No,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no. Yeah.
Deutsche what yeah. I mean, so they have they have some material on that. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Koch was responsible for numerous health experiments in what is now Tanzania, Togo, and Cameroon to find a cure for sleeping sickness. Right.
So that was correct. I
So
remember
yeah,
correct.
so most of Koch's patients were housed in what he called himself calls concentration camps, a model he borrowed from the British administration in South Africa. Sorry, and treated with atoxyl, a substance containing arsenic and already known to be highly toxic in large doses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Koch accepted the pain and agony of thousands of patients, even to the point of death, say his critics, including Haitian American historian of science Edna Bonhomme. Yeah,
There you go. There you go.
yeah.
So this what how does this relate to what we're talking about today? I mean, this was one example that you brought up. Another thing that you mentioned just a few minutes ago that I wanted to ask for the extension for is you spoke of this very little researched dimension that that is essential for the shared human quest of removing the human being from the grips of death. And as you mentioned at the beginning of this program, even the Quran mentions death before health.
Mm-hmm.
That it is an
Before
issue
life, yeah.
before life. It's an issue so prevalent that it is even mentioned before life. And in that dimension, what is very little mentioned or explored or written about is, as you said, I'd like to quote you, the transfer of medical knowledge from the people in the plantations enslaved to the European Western researchers. And I just recently came across an example that I want to mention for our audience. Onesimus, Onesimus, Onesimus is the name of of an enslaved man in the Boston region. From they say he was likely of the same people I stem from. He was likely an Akan. His
Mm-hmm.
real name is unknown and remains unknown, but he was documented by his owner as instrumental in the mitigation of smallpox in Boston, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
He, I read, he introduced his enslaver, the Puritan clergyman Cotton Mather, to the principle and procedure of variolation, a
Mm-hmm.
method of inoculation which prevented smallpox and laid the foundation for the development of vaccines. And
Okay.
here and the empirical data is after a smallpox outbreak began in Boston in 1721, Mather, his owner, proliferated Wanzimu's knowledge to advocate for inoculation in the population. This practice eventually spread to other colonies. And the point about it is, um, I remember reading that there was a death toll of, I think, I don't have the data in mind, but you have to check. There was a death toll in Boston that was catastrophic because an enslaved man had suggested the variolation method. The doctors didn't believe it would work, so they took a cohort. They isolated a cohort of smallpox affected people and applied the variolation method that Wanzimus had suggested, and the death toll was reduced by so much that it was then used and applied to the rest of the population. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the same period of comparable time, one Zimmer's method reduced the death toll, uh, whereas the death toll in the other non-inoculated group remained high. That's how they found out this stuff actually works. I give back the
Yeah, and that is an extremist. I mean, there was in there were cases. I mean, a lot of African herbalists won their freedom by saving people's lives.
we're in the year
Okay.
1716, 1715, around that time.
Yeah. So but a lot of Africans got bought their freedom by saving people's lives. So what would
Knowledge is
happen is
power.
that, yeah,
This
that
becomes knowledge is freedom.
yeah, and a lot of African slaves who were herbalists then because they would actually rent out their them as doctors. They would send them to places as doctors, right? And there were certain types of conditions in which Europeans would have to they would have to stand aside and let them treat. And it's I remember um, because now we're heading towards the Flexner report.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because what the Flexner report does is that it really defines what can be seen as medicine from the perspective of European German science, and it then uses that to destroy African American women's women's and indigenous um, medicine educational institutions,
Yeah.
and to relegate them to not medicine. Right? Okay. So that now when you see there's a whole movement to there's a new movement about what do you call it? You call it um, that is backed by research. What do they call it again? I'm tired, so because I've been
Empirical methodology,
no no
empiricism.
no 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 no. There's a term that was very popular when I was at university studying medical herbalism,
Mm.
which was almost a religion. It was evidence based
Evidence.
medicine.
Yes, yes, that's what I was
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
for. Evidence based. Yes.
yeah. And
It's
so
back.
this it's back, right, in order to relegate methods not on their efficacy, okay, but it must be measured by the definition. So for instance, if you're going to have a double blind
Study.
study,
Mm-hmm.
the ethics of my traditional medicine, we would not submit to that. Somebody cannot come to me for medicine and I knowingly give them something that I know is not medicine,
Mm.
right? In that, in that, by that action, I have cursed myself,
This is
right?
fascinating. Mhm.
Because in that case, I open myself to divine retribution.
Oh.
So there's divine retribution.
Mm.
Then there is, and then there's the ancestral retribution,
That's right.
right? So the whole sense that I have, one, betrayed my ancestral tradition, which is a curse, as a curse of honor, and two, that I have harmed another people. I've lied to them. I have harmed another people who have their own protection. So that would never do that. If you're looking at it from within within those traditions, it cannot be done. It is it is it is it is it is below unethical. Okay.
So, are you saying that placebo, the idea, the notion, the concept of a placebo, utilized in the research and development phase? So, it's the connection, because I can imagine that maybe the idea of placebo exists in other cultures as well. But the utilization of the placebo in a research and development phase, that
No, no,
whole.
forget a research and I'm not submitting to that language.
Okay,
That
that's what
language
I'm trying to.
sanitizes it.
Mhm.
Here is someone who is ill, who may be dying, and I knowingly give them what I know is not medicine, and they believe it is medicine. Do you see it? My
Mm.
obligation as a healer is to treat them, whether they live or die. That is not in my hands, but my obligation is to treat them. That is the contract. I have broken the contract. And I have not only broken a contract between me and my creator, but I have also broken a contract in my ancestral um, inheritance, the lineage.
This is
I
so
take
fast.
it, I pass it to somebody else. Okay, I've broken it on so many. So in that, I invoke a curse, and the curse will come, and part of that curse will come out of me.
It's
Okay.
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. This reminds me verbatim of a passage in the Greek Hippocratic Oath. What
Yeah.
you've just said is almost echoed verbatim in the Hippocratic Oath, of which I invite our audience to go look for a copy on through Google. Yeah, read it.
Yeah.
It harkens back to that. So it's not something as exotic that you're saying here. It is something that apparently it is a point of view that apparently speaks from the from an ethos that was shared from
Okay. All right.
you know.
So let me be clear.
Mhm.
My inheritance does not need a Greek justification.
It's universal.
It is interesting that the Greeks arrived at the same point, and they had to arrive at the same point because it is,
And it's a no-brainer.
yeah,
Mhm,
okay. So when
mhm,
you start to give me language like placebo and this and that, and the other, at that point, I don't know, stop.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
This is how I see it. Well, this is how
mhm,
we see it. Well, that's good. Well, I don't see it like that.
mhm.
Right now, off.
And this is why you mentioned just a bit earlier, you said one has to be careful not to be colonized by those methods of legitimization, justification, explanation of their methodology there.
Precisely. In my education, I take, if I have a medicine, I
Hmm.
check it myself.
Hmm.
I must know how that medicine works. I taste it myself. If I need to fast or meditate or whatever to do, I must know that medicine myself.
Mm.
Okay, because my obligation is never to. I should never knowingly harm people. Okay, so because part of this knowledge is a knowledge of poisons and a knowledge of how to kill.
Yes.
So the reason why often African herbalists will demand such a high price when you come to them asking for poisons, right? And
Hmm.
it's very sophisticated because some of the poisons, they work like this. You will take it, it will do nothing. But if you drink water, it might kill you. Or if you eat this thing that you would normally eat, it will kill you.
Hmm.
So if you eat that thing and you have this and then you have alcohol, then it will kill you. Okay? So with that kind of knowledge, there's a particular fruit which when you eat it, you should not have alcohol after it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you dry it and you put it in their food you put it in their food, and then they drink alcohol. So this knowledge. So the reason why they always demand such a high price is that they know that they will pay a price. So it is to mitigate the price.
Oh,
It is
I
in a
see.
perverse way to mitigate the price. So, well, I'm running that risk, so I'm taking this money. Maybe I can set something up for myself when that happens. Right? Because you cannot escape the knowledge, the understandings. You cannot escape the karmic consequences. I want to use a word that people would more know.
It's 12:20. You said we have
Hmm.
20. You have 20 minutes. Does that mean till 12:30 or does that mean till now?
Well, we started 10 minutes late, so that's
Wonderful.
yeah. So
Wonderful. So please, I just want to read to you the subtitles, and you pick the one that you want to continue with, because
mhm.
this conversation, there's so much that you've triggered now, that I'd like to bring in, because life, what is it? Birth, life, death. Everything happens in these three phases. Everything happens between birth and death in its life. And we're talking about nothing other than this. And you have here medicine as death work. This has touched, the example you gave us has touched a bit on that. Medicine as, the doses, the sequencing, the chronology in which you take it, the quantity in which you take it, could take you back to life or accelerate you into death. But you write here medicine as death work from omission to permission. What is behind that? What is the thought behind that subtitle? Medicine as death work from omission to
Okay.
permission.
Okay. So I'm going to join this question with something I'm seeing because Salim says research standards were set to weed out frauds. Morality of do not harm was infiltrated by greed.
There it is.
Okay. A person who carries medicine would
Mm-hmm.
be in a community. People know who carries medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It is a matter of integrity. It is a matter of transmission and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Remove this transmission and integrity
Mm-hmm.
by delegitimizing
Mm-hmm.
their capacity to practice medicine,
Yes.
and you open the door to charlatans. People know who carries their medicine, especially when it is multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes. Yes.
So the need for the standards, part of that is for something that happened in Europe, in the destruction of their traditional societies. That is not my problem. That's their problem. Okay. Um, we are so what you're talking about now is the arrival through Flexner of a way of medicine that radically breaks with that and now needs that. It needs the state to guarantee, to legally guarantee
Mm-hmm.
your status as a healer.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a doctor. Traditionally, nobody had to guarantee anything. You know, whoever arrives, you must treat them. So, in that frame, you were never allowed to charge any money to treat people. People came and they gave gifts, they gave what they
Yes.
could give.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is a completely different paradigm that destroys medical autonomy. So, get it that even after slavery, even after something like that, these lineages still remained. They were still able to, and these methods were still able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
even after the slaughter of indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
these lineages were able to survive.
Yes.
Flexner was singly the most effective assault on that. And then
Mm.
that was exported around the world until I'm in Guyana, and a surgeon, I'm asked to call to talk to a surgeon because he and I should we should come together about medicine. And his first thing is to tell me that he is a surgeon, and so his knowledge is superior to mine, so I must listen to him. Right? That was the first bit. It was weird. So I said, well, he says, well, how do you know your dosages? Where's your research for your dosages? And I'm looking at him. I'm looking at him. I'm thinking, you fool! You come to somebody. You come to people who have knowledge and experience of hundreds of years, and you, instead of coming and asking us, you coming to tell us you're a fool. So I dealt with him like he was a jackass. I was not kind, right?
You see.
Because of that level of arrogance. Because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, if you are carrying this knowledge of medicine, that level of arrogance is supposed to have been broken already,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? It is not supposed to be with the physician. That level of arrogance is not permitted to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that you will always find in these traditional lineages
Mm-hmm.
that people who practice medicine have humility.
There's something that I'd want to throw in briefly. It is, you mentioned it. I would like our audience not to miss this. The arrogance you mentioned, and the ignorance that goes with it. Today, I was speaking with the Dungaree baker, and she mentioned the combination of ignorance and arrogance is a very dangerous combination when it comes to producing knowledge and information, especially when it's about life and death. The arrogance will block you from listening, and the ignorance will block you from knowing and acquiring new information. And it goes even further. What I wanted to contribute to what you've just reminded me of, it is this. You mentioned 100 years knowledge. You used that expression, and I picked it up.
Yeah. Like hundreds of years, yes.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah,
You see,
maybe thousands.
maybe thousands. And this is what irritates me. You know, I am wedded. You know that my mentor, I've told you perhaps, my mentor used to wear two rings on the ring finger, on the left and on the right. And on the left was his wife's ring. And one day I asked him, why is there a second ring on your ring finger? Are you married somewhere else? Is there something going on? He said, no, I'm married to science. I'm married to the scientific method. And that's why I wear the second ring. And then it inspired me so much that I sort of said, okay, I like this type of dedication to methodological rigor, to the point where you say, I'm married to that ethos. Now, something that irritates me about the Western standardization in medical and scientific practice came to to its limits, or revealed itself to me during the COVID years, during the COVID crisis. How is it you say trust the science, but what we're seeing is that science is basically on an accelerated slalom path backwards downhill? That's the kind of pressure the scientists had to come up with something, to drum up something. So they lose that safety and that security of hundreds or thousands of years of observation and replace it with an accelerated, rapid sort of a crisis response situation,
Okay.
and and they still
Mhm.
claim that the outcome is as safe as the outcome guaranteed by the long duration of one of science's most important paths of insight, observation of long duration.
Okay. Okay. First of all, the training that I have when I was
Mm-hmm,
sitting having my stories, etc.,
mm-hmm,
taught to me about medicine. It is a science.
mm-hmm,
Okay,
mm-hmm,
we must. Okay, this tree is that.
mm-hmm.
This one looks like this, but that is different. That is the male. That is the female. Use that for that
Differentiation.
and that for that.
Oh, differentiation. Mm-hmm,
Okay, it is
mm-hmm,
a science. Don't use it before you taste it.
mm-hmm,
Taste it and sit and see. It is a science. It's a science by observation of myself.
mm-hmm,
Okay, and the extension of that imagination, because there is an aspect of, when somebody tells me that they are breathing oxygen, that's an imagination. They're breathing
mm-hmm,
air,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right? They
mm-hmm.
have been told that there is oxygen in air and that's what makes you live. So then they talk about breathing oxygen. Actually, most of what they're breathing is nitrogen, right? So
That part.
this
That
aspect
part.
of imagination is always within the scientific modeling. Okay. So what the European has done is colonize the word science. Only they may use the word science.
Mm-hmm,
When you take a poison and it is only when two things are used. What do you think that is? That's a science, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Give him
Mm-hmm.
this, but don't make sure when you give it to him that he does not drink water. So give him in the night, and don't put any water next to the bed,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So why you're gonna kill him? Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
good. So um, so this, so what has happened is that the European has claimed science and then conquered people and changed their mindset in order to hold exclusive domination over them as being the only one
Mm-hmm.
who has access. It is epistemological conquest.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's what it is.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm.
So, um, what do you think I'm married to in terms of this kind of knowledge? Right. The and I'm not speaking against your teacher. I'm
No,
just
no.
giving you I'm showing
Yes,
you
yes, yes, yes,
that
yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
that basically, in order to hold these knowledges, you basically marry yourself to them. That is
That's
how
it.
it works.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have to understand is that medicine was the spearhead of conquest. And I give you a story of, because in the line of Sufism that I was given,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a Moroccan sheikh called Sheikh Mohammed Ibn Al Habib. May Allah's uh, mercy be upon him in his grave.
Come, come.
And the practice, which is across Africa, is that when armies come,
It's not.
one group remains to look after the people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is right across. This is why I mean, this is the amongst Muslims across Africa. This is their
Mm-hmm.
method.
Mm-hmm.
That one group will remain. One group of Sufis will remain to preserve knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and to minister to the needs of the people. And the other group will separate and they will fight. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is part of the methodology across at least West and North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sheikh Mohammed Habib was the one chosen to remain in the city and look after the people when the French invaded. So I can't remember the name of the general who came to him. He
Mm-hmm.
says he said to him, he said, "We are bringing you medicine. We are bringing you progress." I said, "Why don't you work with us?" So Sheikh Mohammed Habib, since he's being generous to him as a guest, he says, "I have seen many winds blow,
Mm-hmm.
and you, sir, are one of them." Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what it is that we have to understand that this methodology
Mm-hmm.
of the conquest of your epistemological terrain is part of your subjugation.
It says epic smackdown. And above, it's like teaching for the test. Medical training is done for the medical industry. And this, my mentor that I mentioned just a bit earlier, he said something exactly similar to me. He said, "Stop using the word medicine around me. I want us to talk about health." And he used to say, make a distinction between medical staff and health care staff. Because what you want is somebody who takes care of your health. You don't want somebody who takes care of your medicine. Because the medicine is, as you write correctly, let me see who said it. Salim, thank you. The health,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So here's a classic, right?
Hmm.
The European defines medicine as outside of them.
as outside of
It is
them.
something you take.
Mm-hmm.
We define medicine as something inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
We define medicine as something that is everywhere in the creation.
Mm-hmm.
Creation, medicine is part of Allah's mercy, which is always descending. So
Mm-hmm.
the medicine is your knowledge of how to connect to that descent of mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that there's medicine inside of you, you can take medicine from outside. So you could, so what you do when you take medicine from outside of you is you take something that augments the medicine inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how
Mm.
we understand it.
And
Okay.
I can just to underscore, first of all, this is new to me. And
Hmm.
as new as it is, it falls on very fertile and willing soil, because I've observed that on this topic, people that I've met, raised entirely in the West and Europe,
Hmm.
simply don't have the inner ear to accept this kind of this angle. It is, you go to the doctor does their job, either you heal or you don't heal. But the idea that you yourself, within yourself, have the capability to heal sounds like the peak of esotericism to them.
Yes, because they part of their epistemological conquest
Mm-hmm.
is the conquest of the interiority,
Mm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
always infuriates. Okay, we're really gone over now. Which always
Yes.
infuriates the colonialist is that our interiority is inaccessible to them. Don't care. Do what the hell you
Oh.
like. I am a man with honor already. So a lot of what has happened has been the attempt to break that honor, that intrinsic honor, which is part of your medicine.
Mm.
So when you break that, you break a really deep part of your. So there's a medicine that you carry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All
Mm-hmm.
right. So often, sometimes when you fall ill, just sitting quietly or lying quietly and connecting to that aspect will bring forth a medicine. It might not, it might, you may need support from elsewhere, but that is the first medicine. So I just published a newsletter called the Green Pulse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one. So you'll see that I'm talking about that there.
I'll go to that right away after
Mhm.
this. We have crossed
Okay.
the threshold you set at
Hmm.
12:30. Uh, it pains me to have to end this conversation today, because there are parts of this particular essay that I would like us to dig into. Do we do that next week? Do we continue there next week?
Well, the thing about Dystopia Unmasked is that we move on, isn't it? I mean, there will be
But
another
this one,
article.
but this is an entirely different yet related paradigm. Health and death, life, health and
Well,
death.
maybe that at some point we have to do some webinars and so on. But at that point we will. But yeah, the thing about we is that we move on.
It was exquisite. I love this. Please go and read this week's article. I will have to dig into it, definitely, because this is about the essential, if you will, dualism of the human condition. You are either here or you are not here. And if you're
Hmm.
listening to this right now, you are here. And it's a pleasure for me to be speaking to
Hmm.
the living, at a time when
Hmm.
some of us are trying to
Hmm.
accelerate the expedition of many of the living into the realm of the dead, which is the
Yes.
realm of necropolitics, a subject that is explored in depth on Dystopia Unmasked. I'm very grateful to you that you brought in the health paradigm in this article. We will explore it in the future some more.
Hmm.
And if you aren't a member, if you aren't a subscriber, if you aren't following regularly, please do, and bring others to this function. The more, the merrier. And this really is a good place on the internet to find this kind of thinking, open, constructive, health oriented, and broad. Broad. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And Alex, will you have the last word?
Well, I saw that somebody was it Anuagra said this was really great and illustrative of mental health therapy in the modern times. Yes, because um, yes, it absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And
Mm.
and remember that the separation of of the human being into mind and body is a
Mm.
European um, is a European invention. Okay, because in our understanding of medicine, whatever affects the body will also be reflected in the way that the spirit manifests, which would be mind.
Mm.
And whatever affects, so if you are subject to certain types of repeated injury
Mm-hmm.
which affect the spirit, it will
Mm-hmm.
be reflected in the body. And a
Mm.
classic of that is that looking up to the sky will raise your spirits.
Oh,
Looking
yes.
at the ground will make you pensive and lend itself to deep thought. Just that, right? So this grasp of it's so what we're talking about here is the epistemological erasure of the different ways of seeing the human being to create a way of seeing the human being that is legal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to talk about the human being legally, this is how you have to talk about the human being. And if you don't, there are consequences, right? If you're going to treat the human being in that way, there are consequences.
Mm.
And so this is part of the technology of epistemological erasure. Okay. And I am not I am very fond of the work of Freud. I'm very fond particularly of the work of Lacan. Um and so I'm not denying any of that, but I'm just showing you, yeah, we have to really we have to really enter into this nuanced context and capacity to really interrogate how we see the world, why we see it in the way that we do,
Mm-hmm.
in ways that lead us back to some form of reintegration. Because it is not that we are going to take and as we say in Guyana, we say post mortem does not bring back the dead.
Mm.
Okay, so a way that has died cannot be resurrected. It's, um, what happens is whatever happens is going to be new. It is going to be inspired by that, but you have so that this way of seeing the world is a creative endeavor.
Mm.
So medicine itself is a creative
Mm.
endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's nothing to add, just the invitation to comment on the article, to bring in your thoughts, your associations, your interpretations, your insights. The
Mhm.
articles can be commented on and will be read and will be re-commented on. There can be a dialogue on the substack.com Dystopia Unmasked platform. Thank you all for coming around and staying here. Thank you so much, Alex. This was very rich.
It's a pleasure. Okay.
Thank
All
you
right.
indeed.
Thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. You take care. Everybody, love, lots of love. You take care.